So I'll just put some basic pencil lines in. No particular pencil. I think this is a 5B. Anyone will do. I'm just getting some basic lines and organising the composition. And now I've changed. I'm using a Rotring waterproof ink pen just to put more permanent lines in. And it's an editing job really. I'm taking out pencil lines that I don't want to keep and giving some shape and structure to the image. The Rotring pen is a 0.2mm waterproof disposable pen. Really favoured by me. I love these ones. I do use other thicknesses. So now I'm masking out the horizon, and I use a very fine tipped masking fluid. I think it's 0.5 of a mil. Needs special cleaning. It can be a bit of a chore to keep it clean and not blocked up. But the reason I do this is so when I add the gouache sky, I can do it very quickly without worrying about the edge. Now the gouache is about 50-50 with water. I'm using Prussian blue, titanium white and ultramarine in this mix. It needs to be mixed very thoroughly because streaks can show and they're very difficult to get rid of. So I'm roughly at the place where I want to be with this colour, and I'm ready to go. And I'm using a big flat synthetic brush here. This whole process has got to just go quickly and smoothly. Now you can see where I'm butting up against the ridge made by the masking fluid, so it's really helpful. This gouache will dry darker, so you might see what you think is a colour change when you look back at the first bit you painted. Ignore it, just paint on, keep it nice and smooth, get your coverage nice and even. And you really shouldn't need more than one coat if you've got the right kind of mix. I'm removing that masking fluid and I'm just going over and reinforcing that ink horizon line now. And you can kind of, any little mistakes you've made, you can sort of style it out really with the pen. Now this is watercolour, and I think it's kind of a Payne's grey or neutral tint mixed with a little bit of ultramarine. As I go further into the distance, I'm making the wash paler. Just showing a little bit here of depth, if you like, or trying to make it more 3D by going over some darker spots. And as the hills recede, I've gone into more of a little cobalt blue mix now. I'm going to have a stab at this little hill next to these, I'm going to go further back into these mountains. Now that's quite a dark neutral tint, very dark. If you're not happy with it, there's a couple of things to consider. It will dry lighter in traditional watercolour, or you can just take it off with a tissue or a hungry brush, which is a kind of clean squeezed out brush. Now here's that little hill I talked about, and I've got more green in this because it's closer to us as viewers. And I've done the hungry brush trick and I'm taking out a light patch. Now these mid mountains, this is just a basic wash of sepia, a colour I don't often use, but I just wanted to sort of ground a basic colour in there, and I'm thickening it up now with a bit of neutral tint in there. And it's not just a straight line, so I'm carving some sort of tree shapes in, like negative painting. And I think this is a mix of May green or yellowy green sort of colours, but it's not a flat wash. I'm adding different greens to just give it a bit of variety. I'm using a flat brush here that I've had since I was 15 or so, or even younger, so it's about 40 years old. Synthetic, and a bit more negative painting in a variety of greens, a bit of Prussian blue added to it. A bit of negative painting, really carving out lighter trees in front of it, and a bit more Prussian blue in the mix as I go towards the right hand side of that tree line. I think there's a few different colours in there. The idea is to just give it some shape rather than a flat wash. And I'm using the flat side of the brush and one of the corners, you know, to just add a bit of a shape. Dropping slightly more Prussian blue in there as we go away. The paint here is still wet, so I'm getting a nice wet into wet effect going, which is really nice. And carving some shape up into the tree line. Again, you know, getting rid of the monotony of just a flat looking wash, because that's what it'll dry like. It won't improve. I'm bringing that line down now, more into the mid-ground. And again, I'm twisting and turning that brush to give a different effect, different brush strokes. I mean, you can chop and change brushes, and perhaps I should do. But no, I get caught in a bit of a trance and I'm away. And I think if you just clean out old colour, you're happy enough. Going back now into the mountain, and I've got a colour in here, quinacridone gold. It's a bit like yellow ochre or sienna. Again, I don't want this flat wash, so I'm just giving it some variety with greens. And as I get into this left-hand side, that's pretty much a, I think, Hansa yellow, a bit like a cadmium yellow perhaps. And it's fun. I'm carving into my ridge line here on the horizon, and I've added some greens. Seem to have lost a bit of footage there, but I've added while it's been wet, I've added some darker greens in there. Some more negative painting with very dark tint here. This is more of a sort of neutral tint colour with some burnt sienna added to it to give it a tiny bit of warmth. But it's great. And again, if you just be quite random, you know, I'm hardly thinking about this, but I'm just adding random dark bits where I think they're working really well. Starting to add more green and burnt sienna to that mix as I go down. Still carving out these negative shapes in the mid-ground. And rather than it just look like a dark green line, I'm just suggesting little blobs of foliage, darker foliage, further down into the foreground. Just so I don't get caught in a rut, I've gone in from the right hand side of these trees, just so I've got some kind of plan really that's uniform. Gone down to a smaller brush here. I think this is a mongoose one, that might be artificial, it's a Rosemary & Co brush. Neutral tint and blue, just giving some shadow lines onto these rocks that are just scattered into the pathway. And I'm starting to work on this path that's on the left hand side. I added a sort of, what was it, a magenta, really fine magenta wash, leaving some little white patches of paper going through. Using the small brush now to suggest some rocks and dark areas of foliage towards the left hand side. Working it over to the middle so there's some balance. I tend to stick my tongue out a little bit when I'm painting, something I've done since childhood. I don't even know I'm doing it until I see like a little video like this. Okay, making these stand out a little bit more. Now this is a really dark ultramarine blue with a little bit of neutral tint. I'm just going to give those mid mountains a bit more shape and a bit more contrast. Possibly I've gone a bit too far with that colour there, and you know, you make a call, don't you? You could sort of worry about things all day, but you know, what's the point? Lots of this blue and neutral tint. And I've done my little hungry brush trick. So again, that's just a wet brush or a clean brush with the water squeezed out of it, and I put it on wet paint and suck it off, really, suck it out. Okay, working on this path now with a little bit more of that magenta, but with some ultramarine worked into it. And I'm not just doing a flat wash, I'm leaving little patches of the original wash to shine through. So we've got some shape, some depth. And that works really well for some of the rocks that are just lying in the field here. Now the colours are more saturated and darker, well not darker, but more full of colour as they come into the foreground. So I've got this really thick kind of May green colour, lots of fun to use. And again, I don't want it to be a flat wash. I'm keeping some of that green that I put down originally just to poke through in little areas, and as I move over to the right of the painting, I'm going to change the colour slightly because it will just look flat, and you have to kind of give some variety. So there's some quinacridone yellow going in there, or quinacridone gold, a little bit of Hansa yellow. I want to keep some of this so it looks like I've got light going across the field. So I keep some of this original pale green wash. The right hand side of the painting feels a little bit left out. Tend to do that, it's a bit of a habit really, and so I'm aware that I need to give it some attention. So I've brought that green into the picture. I'm using the side of the brush to get lines really, as well as the flat of the brush to get coverage. This is a small flat mongoose brush. I was using a round earlier on. I like the flats in as much as you can get the actual flat brush shape, but then if you turn it on its side you get a nice line, and then you can just use the corner to just give you dots. So if you're kind of in the trance, flat brushes are pretty good to use, I think. And then yeah, I'm dabbing on some darker colours, wet into wet. Now the painting's dried. I've gone and got a cup of tea, and there are still some bits of masking fluid. Rub these off with your finger, but you've got to make sure the painting is dry, because you'll smudge. Even dry thick paint can smudge, so keep your finger clean. And I'm back in with this Rotring Tikki 0.2mm waterproof pen, and I'm drawing shapes really. The paint does the work to some degree, so you can just draw around little areas where the paint's changed and has created interesting shapes. Also where the masking fluid has come away and I've got this white space, I can give rocks some shape with that now. Little bits of ink going into the foreground. I don't want it to look too pen and wash, so I haven't gone too far back and drawn vertical lines into the mountains. I tend to do that with a lot of the work I've been doing. Look at that tongue sticking out, sorry, that's a bit disgusting. And yeah, I'm going over to the right side of the painting now, giving it some balance with the left by putting some marks in with this waterproof pen. Pretty random. Big long straight lines don't cut it. You need it to be broken up and varied in shape and texture and pressure that you put on with the pen. And there you go, signed, done and dusted. This is Hommersok, beautiful place in Norway, and hopefully I've captured a little bit of it.